Hi there, welcome back to Boy Meets Quilt. I'm Andrew Vay Hansen, and at this point, this is the final virtual trunk show video I will be making, at least for the foreseeable future. This is the last, most recent quilt that I have completed. This quilt I made just as something to do over the last few months. I got to admit, I don't know how you feel out there, but ever since the pandemic started, my creativity has really been at a low ebb. And it's been really hard for me to just force myself to get to the sewing machine and make stuff unless it's stuff that I needed to make, like face masks or something, a quick gift that I wanted to make for someone. But this quilt here was just a project I wanted to work on just to work on. And I really just had a lot of trouble finding the energy and motivation to get through it. So a small quilt like this, so this is only a 46-inch by 46-inch quilt. A small quilt like this would normally take me at the most a couple weeks to complete, and this ended up taking me 6 months to complete from start to finish. So the idea for this quilt came about when I was quilting a bunch of blocks that I had won from the Brooklyn Quilters Guild Biennial Quilt Show that happened back in 2018. And I had entered the block challenge where we all designed and pieced, I think they were 10.5-inch blocks that had certain parameters you had to follow. The blocks were all displayed during the show, and the block who had the most votes from the people who came to see the show, that person who made that block won all of the blocks. Now, I did not actually win the contest. Another quilter in our guild won the contest, but she did not want all of the blocks, and I was the runner-up. So she gave me all of the blocks. And then I'll show you here the quilt that I made that actually inspired this quilt. And so I took 9 of the blocks that had a very traditional feeling to them, and I just put them into a simple layout with some sashing and borders, and then I decided to fill the sashing with as much just kind of graffiti style quilting as possible. And I really loved how it turned out. But this quilt, because I did not make any of these blocks, all I did was piece them together with sashing and borders, and then I quilted it, I really can't claim this as my own. This was truly a community project. But I really liked the idea of these traditional blocks juxtaposed with very contemporary style free motion quilting. So I wanted to do a quilt that I could say I designed and pieced and quilted all on my own. So this is how I came up with the idea for this quilt. So I found a bunch of traditional quilt blocks that I liked, and I started playing around. So I used EQ8 both to find the traditional blocks, because they have an extensive library of blocks on their program, and then also to help me piece the blocks. Because this whole idea was to juxtapose traditional versus contemporary, or as I like to think of it, rural versus urban, which seems to be a theme I like to explore in a lot of my quilt designs. I decided I would place these blocks on a brick wall, which again, if you've seen some of my past videos from my trunk show, I like to have these brick wall backgrounds in my sashing and borders for the quilting. So I went ahead and I used my Hera marker and a ruler, and I marked out straight lines in the fabric to indicate the bricks so that I could follow them when I was doing my free motion quilting. And then I went ahead and quilted the bricks in all of the sashing and the background, and that was my first layer of quilting. And when I did that, I was like, oh, I really like how that looks. And I was starting to think maybe I didn't want to do more quilting on top of that. And then I also realized instead of filling up the entire sashing and borders with this graffiti style quilting, I actually wanted some of these bricks to show through. Like I thought that I would actually really emphasize the idea of this urban quality of the quilting. And so I started quilting with a heavier weight thread with the graffiti style quilting. And I wanted the heavier weight thread because I really wanted the quilting to really stand out on top of the brick quilting that I'd already done. So I started off with these paisleys here, and I just did it in red. And it didn't really pop the way I wanted it to. So I decided, what the heck, let's try a secondary color. So I took the aqua blue because I thought it would be a nice background secondary color because it doesn't pop quite as much as the red. But it's also contrasting with the red. And so I felt like it gave it the overall quilting pattern some depth that hadn't been there before. And I really loved how that turned out. So then I decided all of my quilting motifs were going to have two contrasting colors to provide some extra depth to the quilting itself. And so then once I was done with the quilting, I really liked how it all came out, but I felt like I wanted the binding to pull everything together with this rainbow theme. And so I wanted to do a pieced rainbow binding. But I am not good enough with my binding yet to be able to have done a pieced binding all the way and still have really nicely mitered corners. So I thought, you know what? It would even be, I think, cooler looking to have just the rainbow binding in even sections along the quilt rather than all the way around the quilt. I think it gives it a more contemporary look to the whole quilt as overall. And I really think it brings together the whole rainbow palette of the quilt, especially when you think about this Ohio star in the middle, really matching the pattern of the binding up here and around the sides. And so I call this quilt traditional decay, to kind of play with that urban decay phrase that you hear in big cities like New York, where I live. It's kind of an awful phrase, but it is a phrase you hear, and I wanted to juxtapose this traditional, contemporary, urban, rural that you get with these blocks along with the quilting. So let's take a closer look at the quilting itself. Okay, so here's a look at the whole quilt. And let's zoom in to look at the quilting. So here was the first motif that I did, these paisleys. And then we go up here and these, I don't know what you would call these, squares, overlapping squares. This is another motif that I really enjoy. This is one of my go-to quilting motifs. And I did a green and a yellow for these. And then, once again, another common quilting motif I use is this big old flower. I will probably at some point do a quilt where this is the entire quilting. It's just one giant flower, because I just love how it looks. And I did an orange and lavender thread combination here. And then my final big quilting motif are these chevrons, where I did the blue, and it's a very pale pink. And then throughout the quilt we have this rainbow band that goes up and around all over, and that uses 6 different colors. We have the red, the orange, yellow, green, blue, and then the lavender. It just goes all the way around the quilt. And then we have the rainbow binding, and the rainbow binding is on all 4 sides of the quilt, centered on each side. And so there you have it. This is Traditional Decay. So I hope you enjoyed looking at this latest of my quilt creations. And thank you again for watching all of my virtual trunk show videos at this point, hopefully, if you have. And if you haven't, go back and watch them. I'm really proud of the work that I've been doing. And I could not have done it without the amazing community of quilters that I've met, both virtually as well as in person through the Brooklyn Quilters Guild and the different shows that I've gone to, and my dear friend Shannon Reed, who is a quilter and a crafter. All of these people, this whole community is so inspiring and helpful and has helped me with any questions I might have, any trouble I've been having. And so I encourage you all out there to tap into that community. It's such a great resource. And I've not ever met a quilter who didn't want to help, who didn't have amazing advice. And especially, there's so many quilters out there who've been doing this for many, 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 many years, and they know their stuff. So just reach out, ask questions, and get in there. Get to your sewing machine, do some hand quilting, some hand piecing, whatever makes you happy, whatever brings you joy. And thanks again for watching. Bye.